Bem-vindos to one more episode of the Type Theory for All podcast. As always, this is your host, Pedro Abreu, and in today's episode, I invite my two friends, Eric Bond and Patrick Lafontaine, to talk about the life in industry versus the life in academia. Eric is a PhD student at Michigan University under Max New. He works with some pretty cool esoteric cubical agda stuff. Before starting his PhD, he has spent some time at the consultancy companies 26 Technologies and 47 Degrees, doing some really cool functional programming and formal methods. Before that, we were paused doing an internship at Galois, and even before that, he finished his master's under Benjamin Delaware at Purdue, which is Patrick's current advisor. Talking about Patrick, he just returned from a really interesting internship at AWS in the automated reasoning team. So in this episode, we talk about their research, their academic and industry experience, how the industry is looking like for opportunities in PL and all that. This conversation is absolutely fantastic and I'm sure you guys will love it. But before that, here's a quick few messages for you. Here at Type Theory for All, we have a mission with open access and open education. We abhor the possibility of getting our content locked behind some kind of paywall. So in order to help us to deliver to you the best of type theory, programming languages, and formal methods for free, we humbly request your support through Ko-Fi. Simply go to our website, typetheoryforall.com, and follow the prompts. A donation of any amount, even $5, will be of a great assistance to our cause. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TT4All and joining our Discord. We're currently organizing a weekly study group to learn Cog through software foundations. So if you think that's something you'd be interested in, go to the website and join Discord today. So, Eric, you are an Arbor and your advisor is Mac New, is that correct?
Yep.
What are you guys working with over there?
So Max New's thesis was in gradual typing, and I'm currently working on extension of what he did in the end of his thesis, which was polymorphism for gradually typed languages.
Oh, that sounds fancy.
Specifically a denotational semantics for this. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Patrick, you're now with also a PhD student. I also didn't mention Eric's a PhD student with Max New and Arbor. And Patrick, you're a PhD student. Which year is this now, Patrick? Third?
Just starting my fourth.
Fourth? Oh my God, we're getting old, huh, man?
Yeah.
And the listener who doesn't know, I think Patrick is one of the youngest students. Come on.
So
You finished your undergrad, you were what, 21, 22?
I think only because it's also typical for a lot of the people who join our program to have done like a master's or have gone off into industry before they join.
Exactly. So you are extremely young. You're this shiny young man, extremely smart. I really appreciate you, dude. So what are you guys working on, you and Ben?
So I'm leading Ben's program synthesis effort, I guess.
Oh.
Or on the his main student doing program synthesis. We're looking at more complex types like refinement types, and then some new types we've come up with, which are coverage types. So things that you ship off to an SMT solver to try and test for validity.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to use these more complex, because a type is a specification, right?
Right.
So we're using these more complex specifications to help guide synthesis.
And what language are you using?
Predominantly OCaml, because that's what other people use, but I always love Rust. So I use that whenever I can.
But you're not implementing anything for Rust right now, are you?
One of my synthesizers is written in Rust, but I'm not doing synthesis of Rust.
Right.
Nice.
Tell me about that undergrad project you did that got you super hacky into Rust.
Oh, that was a while ago. Yeah. I did 2 undergraduate research projects back when I did my undergrad at Cornell. One of them, the second one was with Adrian Sampson, who's really cool as an advisor. And he's big into a little bit more of like the hardware software interface. So writing either compilers for like FPGAs or doing type systems to help you program this kind of hardware. And I was working with this PhD student who's now graduated, Dietrich, who was building a system. He was building like a type system for programming like graphics programs. And how do you make sure that you don't have like very subtle graphics bugs when you do this stuff? So I was like, I started from there, and I eventually was writing a DSL for like GPU devices. So how do you make sure that the data you're sending to the GPU is in the right shape that you imagine it would be? And using like an embedded DSL inside of Rust to make sure that all these safety checks happen. So yeah.
Cool. That is really cool stuff. So what are the things about Rust that makes you feel like they got it? Why do you like Rust so much? What is different about Rust?
I mean, I feel like part of the reason I like Rust is because I took like a couple of years of operating systems and architecture courses, and you have to do those in C. And you'd always get these very opaque errors that just be, that you seg faulted. And it's like, kernel interrupt, whatever, 11, good luck.
Yeah.
And those
Yes.
are always very painful to debug. And in some sense, even when you're in Python, you're like, you're doing your Python programming, and then all of a sudden a bug happens. You've hit an unexpected error, and you're just so confused why. I really like that there's a lot of things either in the Rust language itself or in the tooling that people have developed around the language of Rust that really helps you either catch bugs or kind of like write more idiomatic code, or I don't know. It's just fun for me.
How does it compare with OCaml for you?
I like OCaml. I think I actually learned OCaml first as my first functional programming language, which is something I think that was quite nice about my undergraduate program, that they teach functional programming. I think as early as like your sophomore year.
Really? That's pretty cool.
Though, yeah, I always find like little like paper cuts that I don't love about OCaml. I think sometimes there's just like little things that kind of throw me off. And I still use it. I still use it quite a bit, especially because it's used a lot in writing program synthesizers and more academic code. But
something that gets me really annoyed about OCaml, and coming from a Haskell perspective, it's that OCaml doesn't have the dollar operator, right? So it's really sometimes it forces you to use parentheses some places, and the how's it called, like the piping mechanisms to throw the arguments forward is not, it's kind of wonky sometimes in OCaml, and it gets me really frustrated because it seems like it's such a simple thing to have, but it's not really. And the second thing is that you cannot have, I think the data types arguments are always curried. I think like you always have to put it inside a tuple or something, so you always need the parentheses and shit. And that is so annoying to me because, like the constructors of the data types should, for me, it's very straightforward that they should be a first-class citizen, right? Where like just how all the functions you can just call it and build things and just give it an argument. You cannot do that in OCaml. You have to like actually build the actual thing, right? It's not a function. Is there anything in particular that bothers you about OCaml?
Yeah, I'm sure I had a list at some point, but I think overall, I think with a lot of programming languages, I think you kind of get used to these kinds of things, and I think there's actually a lot of optimism.
For sure.
A lot of things I'm very excited about for OCaml, especially with like their new like version 5. They've got support for multi-core. They're doing parallelism, and of course that brings a lot of really interesting like type system work and like language work along with it. So there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on. Rust is just a little bit better for me.
Is the stuff that you had just mentioned for the OCaml compiler stuff coming out of Jane Street? I don't really follow OCaml too well.
I'm not entirely sure. I think Jane Street, at least some of the more language development stuff that I saw recently, was a lot for trying to like get rid of spurious allocations. Like they've kind of tried to borrow a little bit from Rust actually in terms of some of the more recent stuff. I'm not quite sure, but I think this is a little bit unrelated, though. I know Jane Street is very involved in the OCaml community. So.
Okay.
What about you, Eric? Tell me more about your research. So you're doing some cubical agda. You're living in the ivory tower of the dependent types right now. How does that go?
Yeah, definitely stretching my cubical agda legs, joining Max's group. The group as a whole, we maintain this library called like cubical categorical logic. And
that sounds really scary, man.
It can be. There is some voodoo magic in this library. But it's sort of interesting. This is some mix of Max's own experimentation and then us as his PhD students. Like we each like contribute a bit, and so, like the intersecting kernel of like our research. We're trying to develop things that we think would be reusable and then contribute them back to the cubical agda standard library. That's in terms of like programming language stuff, like programming that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, it's a lot of cubical agda.
So what exactly, do you have a goal towards what you're thinking of shaping your PhD thesis on?
Oh boy, year one. Sort of, kind of. Currently, I've been exploring different denotational semantics like models of state. And this is because it's come up as a sub-problem for our research in models of gradual typing and polymorphism. So I've
Do you want to take a break here and explain a little bit what the notational semantics means?
Yeah. So basically, what we're trying to work with here is we have the design of some type system, and we have our type system programming language, right? And there might be some equations that we would expect for it to hold. So, for instance, if you're dealing with state, you might want to say, I can allocate a new cell, or if I get something from a cell and I set a cell, or set a cell and get a cell, then
Right.
I should be able to get the thing that comes out, right? So you have these equations that you would expect for it to hold.
Almost like a specific spec, right? A spec of how your language. Okay.
Right. And so the game you're playing with the denotational semantics is then to say, well, what sort of algebraic or categorical structure sort of reflects the structure of my type theory and the equations that I want to hold in that type theory? So you can work in either an abstract setting and say, for instance, that, like a simply type lambda calculus with your product types and function types and all that is like some Cartesian closed category. You just pick one. Or you can work in something that's like a more concrete category where you say, I have these specific objects and these specific morphisms in my category. And this gives you a little bit more, I guess, like fine-tuned reasoning. But yeah, so in essence, you're trying to find what is a good model for the type system that we're trying to design.
And this type system in particular, you were saying it's a little regarded towards gradual typing.
Yeah. And as a subproblem of this, I've been looking at models of state. So there'll be like, you have Moji's original, most folks are familiar with Moji's like state monad, like in Haskell, like a state monad, right? But that monad has, I guess, what you would call a fixed heap configuration. Like you pick your type, the type of your state once and for all. Like I'm going to say it's from like natural numbers to Booleans or something, right? And for instance, you've like a priori like sort of like said, oh, these are all the cells. I'm going to say all my cells are like these natural numbered indices. Like that's set in stone. That's in comparison to something that's like a dynamic allocation model of state. So there's something that's called like a dynamic state monad, which supports the notion of allocating new cells and setting and getting values from these cells, which has been sort of interesting. And the categorical semantics of that are much harder than the ones that you would have for the regular state monad, because you have to be concerned about, well, this type might be interpreted differently depending on the heap configuration that I currently have. Like what addresses are available and what can I store or what's currently stored at those addresses. Makes things a bit more challenging.
That sounds really, really cool. Sounds like a very, very interesting set of projects you guys are working on.
It is. And it's also stretching my legs in categorical semantics too. This is exactly why I came back to academia.
So this is actually something I wanted to ask you. So you started your PhD, you came back from the industry. Now that you stayed in the industry for what, 5 years almost?
About that long, yes.
I remember we were together interning at Galois and we were roommates. And I remember that you were making this I remember how hard it was for you to make this decision to finish the master's. I remember that you already had plans to go for the PhD, but then you decided at Galois to finish the master's and apply for other jobs. And then you stayed working in these other jobs for like almost 5 years. And now you're back. How was that decision making of going in and back from the industry, man?
It was a very hard process because I think there's I can't think of the right word for it. There's the sort of disposition that people, or the sense that people think that if you leave the academia or whatever, you can't ever come back.
Yeah, it's harder, right? It's harder because we are very badly paid in academia. Like the starting of academia, there has this hump process that is hard to get by, and it's easier if you're younger, right? Because there is also this grinding associated with it that like the older you get, you have other priorities in your life. You have family. You have
you might have children,
right?
Yeah, and so I'd say it was a hard decision to like set that aside for a while, but I wanted to make sure that it was something that I really wanted to do, and I hadn't like quite reached that threshold yet. But after spending some time in industry and doing PL verification related industry research, I decided that I did want to go back. And thankfully, I'm going to kind of do a shameless plug here. There was a program from the NSF called the CS Grad for US Fellowship Program, which targeted non-traditional students, mainly those who are coming back from industry and who want to start doing their PhD. I applied for that fellowship and was awarded that fellowship. And it was, I would say it's a very great experience, and it's basically set up like the NSF GRFP, basically an exact clone, except that it is targeting people coming from industry back into academia, and it actually has some mentorship program to help you make that transition. As in, you get paired with like an academic mentor who will maybe be in your area of interest and will help you consider what you should put into your application and stuff like this. It's a great program. I think I was cohort 2, and I think we're up to cohort 3 or 4 at this point.
That is amazing. So how long does
Yeah.
So you have funding for 4 years?
3 years.
3 years. That's tight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 3 years of funding, and they give you a little bit of extra money on the side to do things like there's some money that you can use for paying for applications, the application fees. And there's like a small allotment for conference travel. I think it's on the magnitude of a few $1,000s for like you can go to a conference using this money to sort of explore your interests or
Nice.
Stuff like that. Yeah. And the period from, I think I applied in, I think it was like the spring of 2022. Yeah, the spring of 2022. Received the notification of award in August, and then did applications that November, December.
That is awesome. Congratulations, man.
If it's something you're interested in, it also, I have to say, in addition to the financial and mentorship support, I think an even larger component of it is direct access to a community of individuals who are also doing the same life transition as you.
How big is your cohort?
I think it's about 40 something people, but that's from various walks of life. Some of them are in their 40s, some of them are in their 50s, some of them have kids.
And all of them are CS?
Yes, this is specifically for SICE, which is I don't know who makes the determination on which programs are qualify or not, but I think it's mostly computer science. There's some forms of computer engineering or informatics that can also get approved as well.
That's awesome. So tell me a little more about the work that you did in industry. So when you left Galois, what was the first company that you went to and what work you did there?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I started out at a consulting role. This was for a small functional programming consulting workplace out of Seattle. Only about 150 people in the company or so, real small. But what we basically did was we would get embedded in other people's companies and we teach them how to program in Scala using design patterns that like folks in Haskell would use, like monad transformers and like final tagless algebras and stuff like this, which was really interesting because you could take some nasty Java code and sort of clean it up using Scala and more principled design patterns. And so it was a really sort of messy but rewarding experience of doing that transition. Like here's this like old Java library, not too principled, whatnot. We can directly interface with, wrap it around with Scala, make it principled, teach people some stuff along the way. And so that was nice. I think I did that for about a year or two. Afterwards, I went to work for a company called 26 Technologies in DC or Arlington, Virginia. And this is a place very similar to Galois. They do a whole bunch of like DARPA-funded PL verification research programs, like hardware verification or, just general formal method stuff. And that was fun. It was an experience to get a little bit closer to academia. We, would have teams of industry and academic partnerships working on these programs together. And I was able to get published in not, crazy top tier journals, but like IEEE stuff in like verification related topics. So it was a good experience. I don't think I've ever been paid that much to hack on Cocker Agda before, and I don't know if I will.
That's the dream. That's the dream.
Yeah.
You should put me in contact with them now that I'm slightly going back, taking a time off from academia.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then after that, you decided to, even with the best life possible for a proof engineer, let's call it a proof engineer.
Yeah.
You still felt that it doesn't quite scratch your itch of being in academia.
I think what eventually pushed me over the edge is like, it was a great position. I mean, I easily could have continued doing it and been perfectly happy, but there was still an itch I wanted to scratch with like diving deep into the weeds of categorical logic and type theory. Like I wanted to go back and, really dive into that and have that sort of academic freedom, because there's a little bit of trade-off in industry, right? You can work on what you can convince people to pay you for in an industry setting that's a little bit tighter than what you can do in academia, right? Like the grants, a DARPA grant for like a verification program is much more rigid. It's like you have these deliverables, these couple months. By the end, you need some kind of working artifact that, might require more programming than, sitting down and thinking about, would this make a good paper?
Right. That is awesome. And, it kind of surprised me as well, because I don't see that many people in the US doing this kind of more categorical programming language. I feel that people is transitioning a little more into the applications of programming language, right? It's not, I have this sense that I even did try to do some research and talked with maybe some older people in the field, like that the computer science in the US grew out, like the academia of computer science kind of grew out of the engineer side of the electrical engineer department. So there is this higher focus on making things work and building things that, it's running of some sense, right? Whereas in the US, whereas in Europe, there is more this sense where, things are more theoretical or more mathematical, and they have this freedom of really diving into the theory. And maybe we also see that a little more into, how the grant system sometimes work in the US as well, where there is often this push towards having this, this is a grant, I want to see something working. I want to be able to show the taxpayers why this is useful, right? And it's kind of a trade-off sometimes, because in Europe, it's sometimes it's almost as computer science is doing something similar as math, whereas it's something very pure and you don't care that much about the application, and that's a little beyond the point. But in the US, that's a little harder to push off, as is more theoretical and more abstract kind of research in computer science. So it's very surprising to me that your advisor is in a position where he can push this kind of research over there, which is very nice, very cool.
There's like a small handful of people that kind of like work on making those opportunities here. Like there's one person who I can't remember the name of, but is a program manager at the Air Force Research Laboratory. That if you look at most of the hot funding that goes through Carnegie Mellon, it traces back to this program manager. And the results of, if you look at the papers that have like, this was funded under this program, they're very on the theory side. So there are some people, but it's not as easy, I admit, like to find those kind of opportunities. What's interesting is, it's like, well, no, never mind. I lost my train of thought.
You're good. So Patrick, let's start talking a little bit about your experience at AWS that you just returned from being an intern over there. How was your time, man?
Yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it. I think in contrast, I spent most of my time in academia, either as an undergraduate researcher or now as a PhD student. So I think I've definitely been wanting to like look on the other side and see how industry folks do it. And I think I can really agree with what Eric says, is like, you're going to have a lot less choice in terms of what you work on when you go into industry. I got kind of lucky as an intern that I had a little bit of flexibility so I was able to kind of bring some of my ideas around like, more complex type systems and like abstract interpretation to what was ultimately kind of a more standard problem of just like of anomaly detection. How do you, like, you have your systems and they're chewing through crazy amounts of of logs. Like, how do we understand what our systems are actually doing and when they're doing something wrong, right? But like, you can definitely end up in, you're definitely going to be, depending on like what your internship is or what company you're working at, you might have, you might be doing something you're not really interested in doing.
Was that your case?
No, I think overall, like
well, I mean, you just said,
yeah,
right?
Overall, I think I got a little bit lucky, and it seems like there's I think interns are sometimes given a little bit more breathing room to kind of like, oh, let's explore something here. And I think especially as I was an applied science intern, so these are more focused at PhD students typically. Now, I don't know if exclusively. I think I met one master's student who was in applied science, but I think that's an exception. And so here they're usually trying to do a little bit of exploratory work, something that like maybe they don't want to put like a full software engineer or like a full-time employee on. They like say like, okay, let's throw an intern at it and we'll see what happens. So I think that's the nice middle ground.
So I know that there is some NDA that you have to respect, and you cannot speak much about the intricacies of the projects that you were at. But what are some things that you can tell us about your time in Amazon? Like, how was the structure of the team? What kind of interests there were there? Did you guys think about trying to push towards a project that would be publishable? What is the idea there? Is it more researchy or more engineering? What is going on with PL over there?
I think Amazon's actually in a somewhat unique position compared to some of these other companies that you find, in that they're heavily invested in like formal methods, and what I guess they just coined the term like automated reasoning. They found a way to kind of sell this as something that gives a lot of value to the company in terms of, they have these large services and it's really bad when things go down. Or there's also a nice way to sell your tools to a customer and say like, hey, I can give you some, nice mathematical guarantees that our software is actually doing what we tell you it's doing. So like in that sense, they actually have quite a large formal methods, like automated reasoning team there at Amazon. And it's primarily in their web services. So AWS, Amazon Web Services, primarily in their web services division. And they're kind of, I think they're largely spread throughout the US in a lot of the major cities. So you have a lot of people working on interesting projects. I think a lot of them actually end up being like open facing, like public source. So like Cedar or Connie or some of these other projects have come from like our internal tools that were developed in Amazon and that have been either released to the public on GitHub or we've published papers about. I think maybe that's getting to one of your questions, which is like, publishing papers in industry. And I think like on one hand, there's a clear reality that your goal is not to publish papers. Your goal is to like, you're essentially like delivering value to your customers, right? So I think in a lot of cases, it's going to be like you're doing something, even just doing something publishable is going to take to a backseat. And even if you do something publishable, there's not really any guarantee that it's worth taking the time and effort. And it is a lot of effort to publish a paper, right? It does seem papers kind of get published, and papers often get published either because they kind of want to encourage academia to say like, hey, look at these problems we're doing in industry, maybe there's some cool stuff here. Or there's also like a lot of, publicity benefit to like saying like, we solved this hard problem and here's kind of how we solved it. And this is something you can go around and you can show to someone skeptical, say like, hey, here's our peer-reviewed paper that shows our techniques, and it can build a lot of trust.
I just returned from a software engineering conference called FSC, one of the biggest. And I definitely saw someone from AWS there that he was, they have this track of papers that is...
the industry track.
Yes, the industry track, exactly. And this guy, he was from Amazon, and they were using Lean to formally verify something in their code base, which I thought was incredible. It was very cool.
Yeah, I think actually, like one example of this is I brought up Cedar. I bring it up again. It's because Mike Hicks is on it, and he's pretty cool. But an example of a person who was originally a professor and now works in industry, right? And like there, they have two implementations of Cedar. They have their fast Rust implementation, and then they have a slower, like formally verified implementation in Lean. And then they use property-based testing to diff the two to make sure that they don't get too far off.
I think that's exactly the project that I was watching the talk at FSC, man. It is exactly that.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a super cool project. It actually kind of aligns a little bit with my research, and I love it. But I think it's also a great example of like how like you can kind of try and get the best of both worlds, where when you're working on, you have your fast Rust implementation, and this is really trying to like push the bleeding edge, and you put a lot of engineering effort into this. And then you on the side, you're also coming up with a formal model. For in this case, it's a policy language, and you're doing this formal model is one going to figure out if you have like any bugs in terms of your in terms of how you're implementing your tool. But then later on, when you want to start like applying like optimizations and performance improvements to your Rust code, you can make sure that you're never breaking any of your customers, or you're never releasing any breaking changes, because you have this formal model that you're constantly comparing it. So you can there's often in some of these cases you can find like a nice synergy between applying like formal techniques and like, the go fast break things industry.
Nice.
But I think that the hard question there is how to bridge this gap of you have this kind of, let's call it the spec in using, say, Lean, right? And then you have the fast implementation using Rust. But then how do you bridge this gap to make sure that they agree, right? That they're equivalent in some sense.
Yeah, and I think actually there's maybe doing this a little more broadly. Like you have your formal methods spec that you verified. And either in the case of Cedar, they do like just property-based testing. So they generate lots of inputs overnight, every single night, and they just run these inputs against both of their implementations. And then your post condition for this properties testing is just like, do the implementations agree or not? So this like differential testing turns out to be like a very synergistic and like low effort, high benefit way to do this kind of work. But alternatively, I'll point out that like another kind of outside of Lean, there's also a lot of work in like automated theorem proving tools like Daphne and other ones that are like built on top of Z3 or CVC5 or something like this. Right. And in there, well, one, you're leaning on these SMT solvers to help you generate proofs. But then once you've verified using an SMT solver, you will then take this code and you can spit out Rust code, or you can spit out Java, or you can spit out something. And maybe, okay, now you have this similar problem you have in like Hawk, where you have the extraction problem, and like you have to verify extraction. But like besides that, you now get like a faster implementation a little bit for free.
But it does blow my mind that Amazon is so heavily invested in formal methods and programming languages that they actually hired the people from Daphne, right? Like the main developing team is now part of Amazon. It's not in Microsoft anymore. And same goes for Lean, kind of, right? Like Leo is in Amazon now. He has Lean Pro, the Lean Foundation going as well. But technically he's at Amazon.
Yeah, and even for Rust as well. Like Rust is also like, they kind of look at this as also kind of like a formal methods thing, right?
Yeah.
Because Rust has a stronger type system, so you get better guarantees, you rule out more bugs, and they're making more and more systems are being built on top of Rust, as you can see by the projects they talk about. And they've hired a bunch of the Rust team from, especially when Mozilla was laying off like people in Rust, like Nico Masates is there, and a lot of other big names in like the Rust ecosystem work at Amazon, or at least have worked at Amazon at some point.
That blows my mind. That's really cool. I didn't know that. Cool stuff.
And question, so the internship was under the umbrella of the automated reasoning group, or was it embedded somewhere in some other team?
Yeah, I guess I was an AWS system manager. So, and I think this is the case that maybe in contrasting into other companies in industry that do research, or like MSR or like IBM Research, where the research teams are like kind of separated.
Yeah. And
I think maybe unfortunately in some cases there's a little bit of a wall between research and like the engineers. There's still kind of like research and scientists at Amazon, but usually the teams are a lot, you're more embedded.
Interesting. Cool.
And closer to the engineers. Yeah.
Yeah.
How large was the office, out of curiosity? How many people were there, say, like the top of your head?
Oh, Seattle is their main hub. So I was in the Blackfoot building, which has 36 floors. I know all of them are currently in use.
36 floors? Fuck.
So that's one building.
Okay.
And they have like, I don't know, like 10, 15 buildings in downtown Seattle.
Shit.
And then they have another couple of them in Bellevue, which is across the river in Seattle. So like, and then they have offices all over the US, right? So like, there's people in Portland, there's people in California, there's people in New York, there's people in Boston. Arlington near Washington, D.C. is their other main hub.
Right.
So like, I mean, not all these people are scientists, but like just in thinking about like the number of engineers or computer scientists that are hired. And I guess of course business people and sales and all that as well.
And we use this website mostly, like basically on a daily basis, and it's kind of like part of our daily lives, buying things on Amazon. It's so convenient, so cool, and we totally forget how huge that is, right? It's one of the biggest companies in the world, and Jesus, it's so much effort, so much money, so many people working on this stuff. No wonder, like you were saying how some of the people there, some of the managers are able to sell the value of formal methods. And that blows my mind. The guy, he has to be very, very good on his business skills to show how much, because what I mean is formal methods is very expensive. You have to hire basically people with PhDs, and, basically the most expensive, one of them. Well, I want to say it's the most expensive kind of development you can make, but I have no data to back up that claim whatsoever. So maybe there's probably other stuff that is very expensive. Some stuff like OS or compilers come to my head. Although you can consider that compiler is a subfield of programming languages in some way, but still, my point being is that developing stuff for formal methods, for automated reasoning, or like having these very strong mathematical guarantees that of correctness of your software, it is expensive because it's extremely hard and it requires a lot of research and requires a very, very technical set of knowledge, not only programming knowledge, but also deeply mathematical knowledge, as Eric was mentioning, like you're getting into the most abstract kind of mathematics that we're talking about, like category theory, which is something that even mathematicians sometimes look on the other way because it's so damn abstract that there's no application for this shit, right? and in order to do this kind of research that these people are doing there, it's not, you have to realize that they're not only sitting down and implementing, they're actually coming up with new solutions to these problems. Like these are kind of problems that nobody has no clue how to solve, has never been done before. Like these ideas of property-based testing, a lot of it is still open problems. Like fuzzy testing are very hard problems that are still being researched in academia. And you're hiring these people that are experts in these fields, and like they're not going to be cheap because you have to. They could have been working as a professor in an R1 institution, and those guys are paid very well, right? So running a large team of formal methods like Amazon does, it's not cheap. It's really not cheap. It's very expensive, and it really blows my mind that they invest so heavily in it. And it's very interesting, very cool, and very exciting as well. Right? Because I think it's a good time to mention that we are having some discussion on the Discord of the Type Theory for All, where someone was asking what are the career prospects in our field, and it was very, very interesting because me and Patrick and Eric, we were just about to sit down and think about this episode and have this conversation, and this guy bring up this question right now. And like there's this guy over there that he has this perspective, like he has this underlying feeling that job in the industry for this field, for programming languages, for type systems, for formal methods, for automated reasoning, he has this feeling that it's not entirely particularly high paid, right? And he's asking, like, what are the people in the industry doing this kind of work? And I think there are two main things that come to my mind when I read his question here. And the first one is, what exactly do you define as high paid? Because all of computer science is extremely high paid, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Come on, 6-figure salaries, come on, that's very high paid. Second thing is that I don't know if I agree with his perception. I think formal methods with the research part of programming languages, I think we're in a very good shape right now because, well, there is some trade-off, right? Because we are right in the eye of the hurricane where we're trying to figure out what the fuck we're going to do with AI. Because AI just fucking exploded. Everyone is talking about AI. Everyone is talking about LLMs. We have no fucking clue how useful that shit is, even though it looks extremely useful, right? And for me, I think it's amazing. It's really cool. It's really useful. And we have to spend money and time and research doing that, right? However, all of the eyes are in AI right now. Everyone is doing AI. Everyone is is going into the bandwagon or however you want to call it. And people are not paying attention to these other areas of computer science that are also very important, right? The other kinds of research in computer science is not going to stop. There is no way that you can stop security, right? And a lot of what we're doing in formal methods is security, right? Like you still have to make sure that things are going to run, right? So everyone is paying way too much attention in AI and programming languages. Well, in one hand, programming languages and type theory and formal methods, in one hand, is not receiving the money either, which is a little, can be a little red herring, right? But on the other hand, there can be a lot of opportunities, right? Because it gets harder to find good people to be hired, right? So if you know how to navigate yourself and how to portray yourself, and if you are actually passionate about this part of computer science, I honestly believe that there is a lot of opportunities in this area right now. And one of the things, like as Amazon, they have to make sure that things are going to run very correctly, because 1 second that their backend crashes, we're talking about billions of dollars lost, right? And also cryptocurrency, I think, this can be a little controversial for many people to talk about, but cryptocurrency also invests a lot in formal methods, because again, if you have some little issue in your blockchain, we're also talking about billions of dollars, right? So for me, me in particular, I find it very, very exciting point in time to be doing programming languages research. So what are your thoughts? What do you guys think about this?
I'd say that it's interesting to me to see more opportunities pop up that are not in the traditional defense or aerospace industries. Like Galois existed maybe for like 20 something years, and it was primarily riding on the back of these sorts of DARPA formal verification contracts and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of seemingly industry postings for things like hardware verification, because that's been in industry for longer than that even. But what seems newer to me, at least from my perspective, are these large groups like the Amazon Automated Reasoning Group, like collecting a whole bunch of folks, bringing in a lot of talent, and working on things that are not in the traditional, defense, aerospace, all these sorts of things. Like trying to bring these formal methods tools into, I would say, even into more of like daily practice, rather than making them lowering the barrier.
Esoteric.
Yeah. Trying to make them a bit more accessible and more usable for day-to-day software engineering, which would be a great win for our field in terms of just just in terms of, getting folks to write correct software more easily. It's a great goal for the field.
I agree. And this is a lot. I feel that a lot of what I do with my podcast is exactly that, making it a little more accessible, taking it out of the ivory tower of academia and making it a little more digestible for the regular folks like me. I'm a regular folk too. I have no idea what is categorical bullshit is going on with Eric's side, man.
Still learning.
We all are. That's the whole point, right?
Absolutely.
Doing a PhD is being extremely lost all the time.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
That's another interesting thing too is the structure around industry research. At least in my experience too, it is a lot more structured. The goals are a lot more concrete. The sort of like skeleton of a paper that you would write is a lot more obvious, I'd say, rather than something that's like pure off in theory land where, I don't know. That's been an interesting observation I've been coming back to the academic side, is the level of, let's see, what's the right word for it? I can't think of the word. Open-endedness, maybe. Yeah.
Right.
Just the open-endedness of academic research versus the more set in stone path of the industry research I've been part of.
Yeah. And I think what's kind of cool is that I think there are a lot of really interesting problems that exist at this intersection of industry and academia. And that I think there's some of these problems where especially as a PhD student, if you're always in academia, you'll see this, everyone has their specific little problems that they're working on, and they kind of keep working on them, maybe for years on end or so. But there's something kind of cool about going into industry and seeing if I want to have impact, if I would like to ship some code or like come up with some tool or something like this that's going to affect, millions or how millions or billions of people or dollars or something like this. Like, there's a lot of, a lot of these cases, they're not like super theoretical. There's some like kind of like on the ground work that can be done where they need maybe like a little bit of help, a little bit of insight, and a lot of stuff can happen, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff. I wanted to ask Patrick, how did you? Because so when I was at Galois with Eric, we were there for a summer as well. We got there for like early May until end of July, so there was plenty of time for us to hang out and to meet people. There was a cohort of 10 interns?
Yeah, something about that.
It was a small company. But we got the chance to meet these other students. Some were also starting PhD students, master students, late PhD students, as was John Saracino. He was about to graduate, right? So they would hire this PhD students of all walks, and we could meet these amazing people as well and do some very interesting network, right? Like Eric's here right now because we're brothers now, right? Like we had this experience over there, and then like we bring this for the rest of our lives. Did you get this opportunity to do network, to meet other interns, or was there a strong sense of cohort? How was the day-to-day experience at Amazon for you?
Yeah, there's definitely, they hire a lot of interns. I think a lot of them are more of the like for undergrads versus I guess I'm a PhD student.
Right. Okay.
So a lot more like a lot of SDE interns. Also a lot of interns of many other stripes. There are a good number of PhD students or other people either working in automated reasoning or maybe they're like applied science interns working like the machine learning side or in security and stuff like this. So I did get to meet quite a few PhD students, and of course they're like actually there were a couple interns on my team, which was kind of nice. So we had our own little cohort, and yeah, I got to meet a ton of people, both of interns or they're even like Amazon has like academic scholars, so professors who are like who are associated with Amazon, or like I said, or all these professors or other people people with PhDs who have come graduated and moved on to industry. So I don't know how good my networking skills were. So I don't know if I got to meet as many people as I could, but I definitely got to meet a lot of really cool people while I was there.
That is really exciting, man. That's really cool. And I'm sure that it was an extremely good experience that, first of all, counts a lot in your CV already, right? Just by the sheer experience. But what counts the most is what you get underneath, right? The experience of the coding in that environment and working with these amazing people and, the people that you met along the way. And now that you have one way or another, you have this line of network that will last your whole life. And it's really cool. Doing an internship, doing the PhD or late in your undergrad is an extremely valuable experience that I highly, highly recommend for any of our listeners who are still studying. It's you don't regret.
Yeah, I would say don't undervalue the chance to peek into the other side to see if that's something you'd want to continue with. Because it's been especially interesting as someone who's kind of like hopped the fence both ways. Is seeing folks who just bury down and stay in one track the entire time, and they don't really know what they're missing out on. It's good to at least know like what what else is out there.
Right. And if anything, you're just going to make a shit ton of money, man. Because as I said, compared to academia, you are in the high box, man.
I do miss my salary.
I'm sure you got enough to invest, and you also have a girlfriend in Microsoft, dude. You're fine.
Perfect.
Just go be a house husband.
Just sit and play with my toy category theory problems.
Where is Eric? Oh, he's just on his corner there playing with his little categories. That is hilarious. That is awesome. Is there anything else that I think that's pretty much what we had to cover?
I think one other cool thing that I was thinking about when Eric was talking about like getting a view of both sides and then kind of switching back and forth is that when I was at the Oregon PL summer school, so shout out to them.
Oh yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, like I think one thing that's cool there. So it is a lot of like either senior undergrads or like early PhD students, but there were a couple people who were from industry who were just like really interested. And I think if there was someone in industry, even if you're like not like Eric, who was kind of doing PL outside of academia, like we had like SCE people, like seemingly kind of like normal industry, folk who are just like, they've always been a little bit curious about like programming languages or like or their implementation, stuff like this, and they just kind of want to get like a little glimpse to see like, like if I were to go back to academia, what would it be like or something like this.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a little bit more expensive if you're an industry person because you're not a student anymore, but I think also a lot of their or hopefully a good number of their talks and their classes are online. So maybe you can look online and just like see what's out there. But the Oregon PL Summer School is like a super cool resource for kind of getting that feel of like, what are some of these terms we talk about? Like, like even building up to dependent types, like you have to go through a whole bunch of other like background knowledge.
Yeah.
And also oftentimes they have like world-class people giving these lectures.
Oh, absolutely.
And in their area of expertise. And they every year they sprinkle in something new. So it's I think it's definitely worth going if you're able to and you have the opportunity and you want to get that view, or if you can't, looking online and seeing what has been posted.
Yes.
There's some real gold out there.
Absolutely. Actually, that's one that is an excellent example of if you are in industry and you were thinking about, as Patrick say, what would it be like back in academia, or like getting at least connected with some folks, learning what they're doing and what their advisors do. I didn't do OPLSS, but I did go to Midlands Graduate School about a year before I applied to the fellowship. And I had the unforgettable experience of watching Andrzej Brouwer and Thorsten impromptu do a debate on the origins of hot, because the projector system,
homotopy type theory, right?
Yep, yeah, because the projector system wasn't working. And it was a fantastic experience.
Oh my God. This reminds me of going to OPLSS and listening Bob Harper ranting on Slack about some very minutiae of the type system or something along the lines of like, there is nothing like untyped languages does not exist. It's only unitype languages because everything just becomes, everything has type unit.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's gorgeous. It's an unpayable experience. It's incredible. Remember that I use, as Patrick said, everything you can find OPLSS online. You can find pretty much all the lectures online. And I used to watch them before. I remember it was like 2014, 2015. I was already interested and I would pick up those lectures and watch on YouTube. But it's just, of course, you will learn a lot from it. You get the feeling and you can work with it. But, being there in person, it's so different. Like it's almost as if you're breathing a different air, because the whole vibe is different. It's a place where everyone there is super interested and everyone there is excited to be there. And like when the professor is speaking, there's something that really captivates your attention. It's almost as if there is so much more at stake because, like you had to travel over there, you had to pay this money, or you're relying on this grant, and everything around you is tailored so that you will learn so much more. You will make these friends as well. You depend. I don't know this year. Did they still? I remember the year that I went, they had homework. Many of the lecturers gave us homework. So you would finish a class around like 4 or 5 p.m. and we would all go back to. At least the more nerd people. There are people who want to hang out and go to a bar or something. But some people would go back and start working on some of the homework, right? And then you sit down and you have this study group and everyone is like cracking their heads together. And that's also an extremely fun experience. I would expect that this would be a bigger issue on this year OPOSS because it was in such a big city, was in Boston, right? So people would have a lot more, they would go out a lot more, right? If I was in Boston, I would stay back doing fucking homework and then shit. I would go and explore the when it's in the original city, it's Eugene, little town in Oregon, north of Portland. And it's an extremely boring town. There's nothing to do there really. So you will stay back and you like to just stay in on campus, and you would hang out more with the people around over there. So yeah, oh man, good times. I remember that there was this one dude from Ethereum that I'm not gonna say names, but I learned, I think 1 or 2 years ago, that he was arrested for for some very serious felony with cryptocurrency. He was high up in Ethereum, and I met him, and he was really cool at OPOS. Anyways.
Yeah, and I guess if I were to throw out another resource, obviously there's well, I guess I say obviously, but it's not so obvious. It's like the programming languages mentoring workshops that they run at many of the conferences are super valuable, and not just for the academia side as well. I think one of the more recent ones, there's this guy who gave a talk, Byron Cook. And that's who, when Pedro was asking earlier there, who's responsible for Amazon doing formal methods? This is the guy. And he was at one of these PLMWs giving a talk about like industry and academia. So I think if someone was interested in learning more, especially more like looking at the industry side a little bit, but marketed towards academics, I think some of these talks are really quite good. And they span the gamut between, top like professors in our field in all sorts of subjects, and also these industry folk who come in. And I guess especially if you get to go in person, usually you get like a little bit of Jane Street swag as well. So one can never complain about that.
Yeah.
Talking about which, I'm gonna publish this episode. Oh man, I think this episode is gonna come after ICFP because I already have another one, and I actually have some swag for people at ICFP. So I have some really cool T-shirt. I'm doing some stickers to put on the laptops or whatever, and I'm really looking forward to that. So, well, when this episode comes out, then we're already gonna have missed ICFP. However, I'm still gonna be in a couple of other summer schools that I'm really excited about. So there is this summer school happening in Birmingham right after ICFP. It's called School and Workshop on Proof Theory. And the organizer is one of the guys that already came here on this show very early on. His name is Anupam Das. Maybe you met him at Midlands.
Maybe, I don't recall exactly.
And if you're in this summer school, it's not really summer school, it's like fall school, right? But anyways, if you're in this school or workshop, hit me up. I can save you some swag. And after that, I'm going to Germany and for the summer school on proof and computation with some of the biggest names of our field. I know Terry Coquin will be there, the father of Coq, Frick Wijek. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he has this really nice paper on the history of the theorem provers that I find really cool. Anyways, there's this really world-class researchers going on in this summer school. So I'm really excited to what is going to come up next month. After that, I'm also going to be in Gothenburg. After that, I'm going to Amsterdam. And after that, I'm going to Paris. So if you live any of those places or you'll be around there at the end of September, hit me up. Let's hang out. And I can save you some cool swag. Well, with that, this is going to be a shorter episode than we usually do. There is a lot going on for all of us. Patrick, he is still he's actually recording this on campus. So I know that he just finished his work day and it's like almost 8 p.m. and this is still considered work for him. Eric just came back from a trip with his fiance, and I'm sure he's very tired as well, but he could stretch things a little bit and be here with us, which I highly appreciate. So thank you so much, guys, for being here with us.
Oh, absolutely. Also, anyone listening should go to Bruce Peninsula, Canada. Beautiful national park.
Hell yeah. You guys were there doing like some hiking. What were you guys up to over there? Have family there?
No, it's basically just there to hike. And it's a really beautiful area, extremely like rocky shores, but like the clearest, freshest water you could imagine with these cliffs and caves and pines. It's beautiful. And it's only about like a 4-hour drive from Ann Arbor from us.
Damn, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
I think I'm going to just hit stop now. So any final words?
Always a pleasure talking with you, Pedro.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. Thanks for having us.
that's it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for staying this long with us. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did recording. Talking with Patrick and Eric are always really fun, really cool stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you liked it, don't forget to send it to a friend that you think would enjoy it as well. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TT4All. Give us some really cool rating on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or whatever you are. Send us, if you have any questions or any comments or any suggestions, send us to our email, typet4all@gmail.com. Don't forget to join our Discord. As always, we have some really cool discussions always ongoing over there. And I think that's it for today. Keeping this short, so take care of yourself, guys.
Este podcast foi editado por Play Áudios.